Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Evie Smith. I'm the Future Pupil Programme Coordinator at the University of Law. Essentially that means I did my bar course with ULaw and then I got pupillage at ULaw, and they invited me back to speak to all of you lovely aspiring barristers about all things bar school, intercourt and pupillage. So without further ado, the talk today will be on my journey to the bar through ULaw. So I'd first like to talk to you about doing the BPC at ULaw. I know bar school can seem a bit mysterious. It's very difficult to know which provider to choose. So hopefully I can shed some light on how I made that decision. So in terms of why I selected the University of Law when I was coming to the decision of what bar school I would like to go to. Firstly, what attracted me to ULaw is as a future criminal barrister, advocacy I knew would be my bread and butter, and therefore I wanted to go to the bar school that I felt offered me the best advocacy training. I saw that ULaw offered 50 plus hours of advocacy training. They still do that, and therefore for me that was a really good feature of their bar course. In addition to that, they have a specialist advocacy committee whose sole job is to organise an amazing portfolio of mooting competitions, international moots, national moots, really prestigious competitions to help you get those titles on your amazing legal CVs and help you get pupillage. And they also have advocacy scholarships, which meant that you could top up the funding you need for bar school by doing really well in your pupillage bar school interview, impressing the tutors who will be interviewing you, and they decide to award you a scholarship. So that was the first reason why I picked the University of Law. Secondly, ULaw have a selection process which I currently manage. Selection, whilst it can seem daunting, it really isn't. All they're looking for in selection interviews for bar school is potential. As long as you can show you have the interest in becoming a barrister and have the potential to make a great future barrister, once you've received 50 plus hours of advocacy training, you'll get into bar school. But what's really good about having selection for a bar school is firstly, your class sizes will be smaller and therefore you'll get more one-on-one interaction with tutors. When you do advocacy exercises, you'll only be doing it with one or two other people. And also your cohort will also be selected, which means they've all also demonstrated that they have the potential to be excellent future barristers. And that means the peers that you make friends with on your bar course will have similar accolades to you, similar potential to you, and then when you work with each other, you share notes, you practice interviews together, you practice for competitions together, you'll be practicing with people that have the talent that you also have. So that's a really great thing about ULaw's bar course too. Thirdly, their careers team. I absolutely wholeheartedly thank ULaw's careers team for helping me get pupillage. They were giving me one-on-one weekly appointments for pupillage. They read through every single pupillage application I did, line by line, scrutinised everything, helped me prep for interviews. I cannot recommend them enough. For me, looking back, having a really good careers team is absolutely invaluable, and you'll get that at ULaw. And not only will you get it at ULaw, you'll get it as soon as you firm your place. So if you firm your place for ULaw in January and you don't start in September, you're still going to get over 9 months of access to an employability team whose sole job is to help you get pupillage, which is absolutely invaluable. So that's another good aspect of ULaw's BPC that helped me make the decision when I was making the decision back in the day. Fourthly, when I was deciding whether to go to bar school, it's when they brought out the 2-part BPC. And this will be available to you now from other providers, and it can be difficult to decide whether you want to do a BPC that's split into 2 parts or a BPC where they do all of the modules throughout the year. My personal advice, and when I was deciding whether to go, my decision was to not do a 2-part course. A 2-part course, which is provided by some of the other providers, means your first term on the BPC will be doing only the litigation exams. If you spent time on legal Twitter, you'll have seen every so often, you'll get loads of tweets about how BP students have had to do hellish exams where they're online for 3+ hours without breaks and all the rest of it. The exams crash and they're really difficult exams to do. Those are the litigation exams. If you do a 2-part BPC, you'll be doing those litigation exams in the first term, and the entirety of your first term will be studying for those exams. Studying for those exams is without doubt the worst part of the BPC. If I'm completely honest, they're really difficult. You have to read volumes of text that are about this big. You have to memorize all 3 of them word for word. That's what those 2 exams are. If you don't do a 2-part BPC, you'll be revising for those throughout the year, and it will be balanced with doing really fun stuff like advocacy, skills training, and it will mean you get a lot longer to revise for them. If you don't do a 2-part BPC, like the one at ULaw, you'll do your litigation exams in the second term, and therefore you have double the time to revise. You'll be doing advocacy from the very beginning of your course, which means you'll be more prepared for pupillage interviews and for mooting. You'll already have all the skills you need to succeed as a barrister a lot earlier on. So that's my next point to you, is that I would advise you not to pick a BPC that is split into 2 parts. And finally, ULaw for me offered me the BPC LLM. I was lucky enough to secure an in scholarship, but I still needed money to live on in London, and the BPC LLM would give me a postgraduate student loan, which is an extra £12,000 that helped me fund my bar course. Which brings me on to my next topic today. How on earth do you fund such an expensive course? How did I do it? And how did I pick my Inn of Court to apply to for a scholarship? If you're not already aware, the Inns of Court are your saving grace when funding the bar course. They can give you in excess of £20,000. If you're good, you can very easily get that. Just be prepared when you apply. How do you decide which inn to apply to? They all virtually do the same thing. If you're not aware of who the Inns of Court are, it's Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Inner Temple and Middle Temple. I'm a member of Inner Temple, I love it, but there honestly isn't much difference between the 4 inns. The priority for you is looking at all 4 Inns of Court applications and deciding which application allows you to make the best pitch as a future pupil barrister. That's what I did. I picked Inner Temple because they were the only Inn of Court to ask specifically in a question about advocacy. The best thing I had on my CV was my advocacy achievements, and therefore I felt Inner Temple gave me the best application to pitch myself well. And that's a decision you need to make. That should be the priority on your mind when applying to the Inn of Court. Which application allows me to make the best pitch? If an application asks for all of your module grades and you have a module grade that lets you down, don't apply there. But if you've done well in every single module at university, apply there, because then you'll look like a cut above the rest. And that's what you need to be analysing when looking at the Inns of Court applications. If all of the applications will make you look fantastic, or you don't think there's one that really stands out, you can then start to think about how much does the inn have to offer. Some inns have a lot more in their scholarship pot than others. You can think about the size of the Inn of Court and its character. If you want a really big and diverse inn, go for Inner Temple and Lincoln's Inn. If you'd like a small, intimate experience, go for Gray's Inn or Middle Temple. They're the smaller inns. If you want an inn that guarantees you an interview, in the sense that maybe you don't have all the experience and skills down on your paper application, but you feel by the time you get into an Inns of Court interview, that's where you'll shine, pick an Inn of Court that interviews every single candidate, and those inns are Middle Temple and Inner Temple. If you think by contrast you'll really stand out on paper, you've already got everything that they're looking for, apply to an inn that operates a paper sift, where if you get an interview, you know that you're one of only 60% that's got an interview, and therefore you have less competition for the scholarships. The inns that operate a paper sift are Gray's Inn and Lincoln's Inn. You can also look at an inn's approach to finances. Maybe that will help you make your decision. Inner Temple and Middle Temple, look at your finances when you go into the interview. They have always prioritised socioeconomic mobility at the bar, and they award scholarships with more of a means testing involved. Lincoln's Inn and Gray's Inn still operate some means testing, but they have been the inns that have been slower to do that, and they prioritise merit over means rather than evenly balancing them out. If you still can't decide after looking at all those different criteria, the last thing you can look at are the options in terms of the educational opportunities offered by the Inn. My tips to you: if you value having a barrister mentor, apply to Gray's Inn or Inner Temple. They will guarantee giving you a barrister who will mentor you through the entire pupillage process. If you are struggling to get mini pupillages, apply to Middle Temple or Inner Temple because they have mini pupillage schemes. If you are struggling to get marshalling opportunities, apply to Lincoln's Inn because they have a marshalling scheme. So those are just some top tips otherwise. So in addition to getting my Inns of Court scholarship, I also funded the BPC, as I said, by getting that postgraduate student loan. So for me, that gave me more than enough money to do the BPC, and therefore, if I didn't secure a pupillage, I knew I hadn't put myself in even more debt than the current university fees, which are extortionate. We ignore the 80k we will spend on undergrad, but if you can fund the BPC, if you're really struggling for money, there are so many options out there. Just get ahead of the game with Inns of Court scholarships and think about getting a postgraduate student loan. With the postgraduate student loan, a side point with that is you can only ever claim it once. So if you are deciding whether to do an LLM, think very carefully about whether to do that with a postgraduate student loan, because if you do an LLM and you claim that loan, you can't then claim it for the BPC. You can only ever claim it once, so think very, very carefully about when you want to do that. In terms of my approach to pupillage applications then, this is probably also going to be useful to you guys, I hope. Anyone going into their final year of their undergrad, anyone on their GDL, you can apply for pupillage this year. My top tip to you, if you are going to do that, is to treat it as a practice. Don't be emotionally tied to the outcome. Don't expect to get pupillage this year. If you are able to approach it like that, do it. If, however, the rejections will put you off, if you're too tied to the result, maybe wait until you've got more experience on the bar course. But if you're ready to give it a go this year. So in terms of approaching pupillage, this is my path to pupillage. I'll just give you a brief outline before I go into all of my top tips of how I approached pupillage and getting pupillage. So at school, I started off by competing in international mock trial competitions. I absolutely loved them, and that's when I fell in love with crime. So it was from school that I decided I wanted to be a criminal barrister. I am well aware that that makes me very lucky. I have known from a very young age exactly what I wanted to do, and therefore I was able to shape my entire legal journey towards the criminal bar. Other people aren't so lucky. Maybe you're applying for pupillage and you still don't know what practice area you want to do. You are not the only one. Most people are in that position. Don't be fearful of it. Just be super open-minded with where you apply and just try and get as much experience in all of the practice areas you're interested in as possible, so you still have as good a chance as people that have been committed since day one. So after I did the criminal mock trial experience, I decided to get a realistic understanding of life at the bar, and the only work experience available to me at that young age was with criminal solicitors, so that's what I did. I then went to UCL for my undergrad, so no, not Oxbridge. You do not need to be at Oxbridge to be a barrister. Most barristers practicing are not at Oxbridge. And I only got a 2-1. I say only. I feel proud to get a 2-1 in a law degree. It was very difficult. But again, you do not need a first-class degree to be a barrister. Most barristers don't have a first-class degree. And that means most barristers marking your applications don't have a first, and most barristers interviewing you don't have a first. So please do not feel that your undergraduate grades and your undergraduate university will hold you back. It absolutely won't if you get all the experience and the skills you need to succeed. So whilst I was at university, I applied for my Inns of Court scholarship. I've already talked you through why I applied to Inner Temple. It was because I felt they were the most committed to people's advocacy experience. I joined Inner Temple after securing my scholarship. That's another tip for you guys. Don't commit to an Inn of Court until they've given you the money, because you may want to, if you get rejected for a scholarship, you may want to wait and apply again the next year and apply to a different inn. So only join an Inn of Court after you've got your scholarship, unless you're going to go into bar school without a scholarship. I also undertook all of my mini pupilages at university to try and get them out of the way before bar school. I applied for all of my mini pupilages in my year abroad year, so before my final year, because I wanted all of the placements in place for when I started my final year. And I suggest if you're in your second year, that's when you start applying for mini pupilages, based on my personal experience. Or if not, at least try and get all of your mini pupilages done before you start bar school. It was during bar school that I applied for pupillage for the first time, and I had a proper go at it. I put in 14 pupillage applications, 7 first round interviews, so that means 7 rejections outright, obviously absolutely devastating. I then got 2 second round interviews, so that's 5 rejections at first round interview, and I got a reserve offer. Life seems to happen in a way you don't want it to. Both people that got offered pupillage at the place I got a reserve took it, of course. I was devastated and would have to apply again the next year. Yes, I had a pity party for about 2 weeks, but then I pulled myself together and I decided I was going to apply again. So what did I do in order to re-get my mojo, as you might like to say? Well, on my bar course year as well, I also completed all my qualifying sessions, made sure I did well on the bar course so I could get called to the bar. But more importantly, I scrutinized all of my pupillage applications and I identified what was missing. I've said already I was committed to being a criminal barrister since I was 16, so I'd already obtained a lot of experience. I felt I already had everything they could possibly want, but I certainly didn't. I looked at my applications and there was nothing on there that really stood me out from the crowd, if I'm perfectly honest. Nothing made me any different than most other good pupillage applicants, and I knew I needed something on my CV that would make barristers' jaw drop when I went into those interviews. I also realised I didn't have any proper pro bono experience working with defendants or people involved in a criminal process, and I had no real life advocacy experience. I'd got a few good mooting competitions under my belt, a few good mock trial competitions, but I didn't have any experience actually being in court. And so when you're looking, maybe after you finish bar school and you're still not having success with getting pupillage, it really is going to be down to not having enough legal work experience in the real world and not having real advocacy experience. So that's what I went to get. I worked at Intervene Project for a year, managing a charity that provides legal representation to prisoners. In that job, I managed a portfolio of over 200 clients. They were solely mine. I managed 20 legal volunteers who were in similar places to yourselves. And that job gave me the best platform possible to put forward some really strong pupillage applications. The difference in how my applications were received after I was doing that job was so profound, very profound. So as you can see from the second time I applied for pupillage on the screen, I put in 23 applications because I had so much time because I wasn't on the BPC anymore. I got 15 first round interviews, 5 second round interviews, my offer from Foundry Chambers, which would be to practice in crime, and 2 reserve offers. So that job for me was the sparkle on my applications. So I will always say to anyone else, if you're having no luck on bar school, if you're having no luck whilst doing your undergrad, wait until you finish, get a really good job after bar school that will give you some really good real life experience in the law, and your pupillage applications will succeed. Don't give up until you get to that last stage, because that last stage will probably be the gold dust on your applications. Anyone that gets pupillage before they've been practicing in the law after bar school is one of the lucky ones. They are the few and not the many, so please don't give up until you get there. In terms of selecting chambers then, how on earth did I choose which chambers I wanted to apply to pupillage at? Start with the Legal 500, start with Chambers and Partners, and start with the Pupillage Gateway. These are massive search engines where all of the chambers that you could possibly apply to will be on there. On Pupillage Gateway, every chamber that's offering pupillage in the year you're applying to will advertise their vacancy on there. Once you go on there, start creating a colour-coded spreadsheet. Put on that spreadsheet every single chambers that tickles you, and then what you're going to do is visit every single website of all of those chambers, Get all of the information you can about them and shove them in that spreadsheet so you can clearly see in one place which chambers are the best ones for you. In terms of the criteria you should be looking for when you're researching these chambers on their website, where is the chambers based? Remember, pupillage is a long-term plan. You need to be thinking about, if you stay in the same chambers for the rest of your life, where do you actually want to be practicing? If you don't want to go up north, don't apply to chambers for pupillage up north. If you're only happy in London, only apply to pupillage in London. You could very well be at the same chambers for the rest of your life. You don't want to be in the wrong area. So only apply to pupillages that are in the area you want to practice in. This goes to the same for practice area as well. You can, of course, move from chambers to chambers, but be applying to pupillage in the practice area you want to practice in. You can also look at the chambers application process. What kind of questions are they asking? Do they ask for long research questions where you're going to have to spend a lot of time finding statistics, legal arguments, legal authorities? And are those the kind of questions that you are really good at? Or would you prefer to be doing applications that are more substantive? Why do you want to be a barrister? Why would you be a good barrister? Again, the same as with the Inns of Court scholarships. Pick the applications that allow you to shine. Some people are really good at research. Other people are really good about writing about their achievements. Pick the ones that are right for you. Look at the chamber's culture, their diversity, their ethos, their values. Look at who they typically recruit. Do those look like the type of people you want to be spending the rest of your career with? If you're applying to chambers that don't give you a good vibe, you're not going to be happy there. Pick the chambers that give you a good gut feeling about who they normally recruit, their approach to all things at the bar, their approach to pupillage too. Think about whether you'll have any co-pupils at the chambers. So if a chambers is offering 4 pupillages, you'll therefore have 3 people that you're doing pupillage alongside. You then want to look at whether the set approaches that as a competition, in the sense that maybe they have 2 spots for tenancy, which is where you get to stay at the chambers, or do they offer tenancy to all 4 of you as long as you meet the standard? I wanted to go to chambers where I knew that as long as I met the standard, I was guaranteed tenancy. I didn't want to go to a chambers where I was fighting my co-pupils for tenancy, because it's just not the vibe that I was looking for. Whether you would enjoy that kind of competition is entirely your personal opinion, but make sure you research it, make sure you research the set in enough detail that you know what you're getting into. You can have a look at the rankings of the chambers, but don't treat that as a be-all and end-all. As long as the chambers you're applying to have KCs, they'll be in excellent chambers. The fact that they are on Legal 500, the fact that they are on Chambers and Partners means that they're good. Whether they're in Tier 1 or Tier 4 really doesn't matter. You need to be focusing on whether they're the right chambers for you. And in terms of anything else, those are the general criteria that you want to be looking at. You then want to prioritize which chambers are your favorites and do those applications first. You can do any of the chambers you're less bothered about at the end if you have some spare time. Do the chambers you really care about first, so you know you can do a strong application and put forward your best chances at that chambers. A top tip from me as well, look at the questions each chambers is asking and see if there are any that ask exactly the same question. If there are, you can draft them together. Obviously, make them tailored to the chambers, but if you can draft 2 or 3 pupillage applications at the same time, you'll save so much time and you can make so many more applications. So that's my top tip. This is a spreadsheet example. On there you can see that they put the names of chambers, how much they're offering, where they're based, what their practice areas are, and all of the other criteria I've already been through with you. Mini pupillages quickly, I thought some of you might benefit from knowing how to approach those applications. In terms of selecting chambers for minis, approach it in the same way as with pupillage, but a mini pupillage application is usually a CV and a cover letter. Go to each chamber's website, look at the tab with mini pupillage on it, that's how you should be applying. But with a CV for a mini pupillage, make sure it's only ever 2 pages at 12-point font. Make it relevant to the practice area you're applying to. Make it as concise and neatly laid out as absolutely possible. For a cover letter, it should always be 1 page split into 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph, why do you want to be a barrister? Second paragraph, why will you be a good barrister? Third paragraph, why are you applying to a mini pupillage at that chambers? Standard formula, you can't go wrong. I use that formula for all of my mini pupillage applications, had a good choice of which mini pupillages I wanted to do. So I fully back that method, definitely approach it in that way. In terms of approaching pupillage applications, approach it like a barrister. That is what I tried to do. And that means every claim you make in a pupillage application needs to be backed up by evidence. And in order to ensure that every line of a pupillage application is relevant, it should be feeding into 3 submissions. That's how you want to approach it. Your application should be your submissions as to why you should get pupillage in that chambers. The 3 submissions you need to include are that you want to be a barrister, secondly, that you will make an excellent barrister, and thirdly, that you will thrive at the chambers you are applying to. Every single line of a pupillage application should feed into those 3 submissions. Anything that doesn't get it out of your application is taking up space. So, why do you want to be a barrister? How do you approach that question? I tried to approach it in the sense of firstly showing that I actually knew what a barrister did. And so that was informed by my mini pupillages, by any work experience I had with barristers, any reading I did into the bar, any solicitor work experience, marshalling. All of those opportunities are excellent for describing and showing that you know exactly what a barrister does. And remember to be realistic in your answers. You can talk about the benefits of being self-employed, but remember the drawbacks too and show that you understand there are drawbacks. Remember, being self-employed at the bar means probably no maternity pay, probably no sick pay, probably no pension, probably very great difficulty in getting a mortgage. All of those things are part of being self-employed. So only speak of the wonders of being self-employed if you can actually show you understand the realities of it too. And then also in that question, you need to show why you want to do what you've seen on your work experience. There will be a reason why you want to be a barrister. Just think very carefully about it. For me, it all stemmed from that mock trial experience I had at school. I fell in love with advocacy and I tried to talk about that as candidly as possible. So sit and think, why genuinely do you want to be a barrister? What was the first thing that sparked your interest in the bar? And try and describe that in the most candid and personal way possible. In terms of approaching why would you make a good barrister, simply here I would link all of the core attributes I felt a barrister needed to have to my work experience. Every time pick the strongest example you have for each attribute. Those attributes should be oral advocacy, especially at the criminal bar. That is going to be your bread and butter. Show that you like standing in front of people and delivering greatness, essentially. Written advocacy, don't underestimate the importance of it. The strongest piece of evidence that you are a good advocate on paper will always be your pupillage application. Your pupillage application is your saving grace. Make that in itself a piece of written advocacy. You can also think about essays you've done, articles, your grades at bar school, your grades on undergrad. All of those things help feed into your written advocacy ability and also your intellectual ability. I've said you don't need a first to get pupillage. I've said you don't need to be at Oxbridge to get pupillage, but you need to have evidence in your application that you are a cut above the rest in terms of your intellectual ability. If you feel your application lets you down here, your interview is going to be your saving grace. If the person in the interview room going before or after you has a doctorate, has a PhD, has masters, went to Oxbridge, but they are less impressive than you in an interview in terms of how they answer questions, you will have proven to the panel that you have a better degree of intellectual ability than that person with all those accolades. Because the barristers are always going to believe what's in front of them over what's on paper. So your interview is always your saving grace, but do try and get the best grades you can. You haven't got good grades, try and show it in other ways. Try and show it in essays, academic prizes. Your in-scholarship is great for showing intellectual ability too. Just think of all of the possible ways you could show you're a cut above the rest. Interpersonal skills, another really important skill to demonstrate. The best thing for this is pro bono work. especially at the criminal and family bar. You need to prove both to panels and to yourself you can deal with high emotional stress. You can deal with volatile, vulnerable individuals, and you can deal with them well on a daily basis. That's something you need to prove to yourself as well as other people. The best way to do that is pro bono work. Work at a charity, work in something like Intervene project that I did, work at FRU, work at Citizens Advice, work at the pro bono clinics in your universities. Just try and get some experience with real life people going for real life experiences. And finally, the last skill I tried to show off was my drive and commitment to the bar. The best way to show this is through your work experience and showing that at each stage, once you decided to embark on this journey, you were committed to it, you kept striving to better your application, better your skills. That shows commitment. And if I'm completely honest, you will not get pupillage if you don't have drive and commitment, because it's a tough, heart-wrenching process. It will demand so much of you. You will face so many rejections. You need to be going in there knowing you can succeed, believing you can succeed, and then you will succeed. In terms of how you approach why this Chambers, this is without doubt the most annoying question on a pupillage application, because the Chambers know that you don't have any experience of them. Yes, it's super annoying, but yes, you still have to answer it. How on earth do you answer it? Well, the best thing to do is to try and get experience with the Chambers if you can. Think mini pupillages, think reading articles, think webinars, think events. All of the Chambers, even if you can't get a mini, will have events that you can go to or that you can watch on YouTube, or you can read their members' articles. That's all exposure to the Chambers that you can talk about in this question. I also talked about any experience or skills I had in Chambers as niche practice areas. So a tip I use quite a lot at my criminal applications was in relation to sport. A lot of criminal bar Chambers, they also practice in sport regulation. I played sport to a high level at university, so I would talk in all of my applications about how I was interested in rugby regulation, how I was interested in whether injuries would be classed as part of the game of sport, or when they crossed into being criminal activity, when they would constitute ABH. I talked about that a lot for Chambers, where they also practiced in sport regulation as well as in crime, because that helped flesh out that question. You can talk about cases that Chambers have been involved in this question, but do it with caution, because remember that the barrister interviewing you may have been involved in that case, and barristers are going to love it if you love their work. They're going to ask you about it. So only ever write about cases that Chambers have been involved in if you've read the case, you understand the case, and you're comfortable about talking about it in interview. And finally, you can talk about the more or the less sort of objective points about why you like a Chambers. Talk about their diversity, talk about their size, their character, their ethics. Anything that draws you to the Chambers. You can be very personal in this question. You can talk about that too. But those are just 4 ways that I tried to answer this question. It is a difficult question. Everyone finds it difficult. Just try and put something in there that stands you out from everybody else. In terms of my top tips for drafting applications then, after that advice, make sure your application is well evidenced and factual. Use only simple language in a pupillage application. Barristers in court won't be using flamboyant words. Everything they say needs to be understood by every single person in a courtroom. So do not think you need to be flamboyant in these applications. Always use your strongest points. As I've said previously, your application should be a piece of written advocacy. Lead with the strong points, don't include the weak points. Proofread your applications. Spelling, punctuation, and grammar mistakes is the easiest way to get an application thrown out, because a barrister can reject you and they can do it without thinking twice about it. It's the easiest way a barrister can reject you, so just don't put spelling, punctuation, and grammar mistakes in those applications. Take out anything you don't need in an application. So as I've said before, anything that doesn't feed into those 3 submissions, get it out of the application. It's taking up space. Get feedback on your application, send it round to everyone and anyone that will have time to read it. Get perspectives from people at the bar, in the solicitor profession, and people that have nothing to do with law. Honestly, send it to some of your friends and be like, how boring is this to read? If it's boring, redraft it and make it more interesting. And that feeds into my next point, show character in your applications. I knew I wanted to go to a Chambers that was fun, that would value a bit of humour, that was light-hearted. So I put loads of jokes in my applications. And the Chambers that rejected me, I was like, great, that means I'm not going to a boring place. So honestly, just be yourself in your application, and then you know the Chambers that like you for you, and the Chambers that reject you, that's on them. Try and use the active voice. So always write your application from the perspective of, I did this, I gained these skills, I developed this experience. Don't talk about it in a passive way, such as this opportunity enabled me to do this. It's just a very small tip, but it makes your writing so much more punchy and effective if you talk a lot about, I did this, I was active in doing this, lots of verbs. Just if you speak in your applications in that way, it will be a lot more effective. And also avoid excess adjectives. They will really annoy your reader. If you are using adjectives in every sentence, you will really annoy who is marking your application. Every time you use an adjective in an application, remember that adjective must be backed up by evidence. So if you're using 20, 30 adjectives, that is a lot of extra words in terms of evidence that you need to write about. So only use them well and use them carefully. And also remember who your reader is. It's overworked barristers getting no money for reading your application. They're having to read hundreds of these forms. They're very bored by it. They want a task to be over as swiftly as possible. Remember that. The journey and the time from your barrister picking up your application and putting you in the interview pile should be as swift and effective as possible. Make it happen in the first few sentences if you can. Don't make a really long application where you're telling the barrister to turn back to page 2 to find out more information, flick here for more information. Don't do an application like that. You'll really annoy them, you'll tire them out, and they'll probably say no. Make it quick, make it snappy, make it concise as possible. In terms of interviews, just quickly, you're going to hear a lot today about how to approach interviews, so I just wanted to give you some top tips from me personally that I feel might help you. So always try and maximize your interview opportunities. Try and get in the interview room as many times in a pupillage cycle as possible. The best way to do this is to make as many quality applications as possible. My tip to you, 8 strong applications is better than 20 weak ones, but 20 strong applications is better than 8 strong applications. So make as many quality applications as you can. Show personality in your interview, be memorable. Scrutinize your application inside out in a pupillage interview. Try and structure your pupillage interview answers. Show your thought process. Try and signpost your answers. Try and create crib sheets for your advocacy exercises. If you go into a pupillage interview with a structure all neatly laid out for how to approach a plea and mitigation, a bail application, or civil submissions, it means when you get into the interview room, you'll have that nice structure to fall back on, that nice safety net of when you're absolutely panicked, you're really nervous, you've got a structure in place already, and you can always fall back on it. And also with virtual interviews, don't do the whole sticky note situation where you've got sticky notes all over your wall behind the interview. Would you go into a physical interview and stick sticky notes on a barrister and read from them? No, it looks absolutely ridiculous when you have those in a virtual interview. Your eye contact is going to be terrible. You're not going to be present in the interview, so don't do it. Treat a virtual interview just like a physical interview. Be present, don't have notes out, just go into it with a clear head and you'll do so well. And then I'm not sure how the time's going, but I'm almost done. What resources did I use to help me with my pupillage applications? Super, super important. Get a mentor who's at the bar. Get them to read your applications. Ring them up when you have rejections. Get them to console you. They'll be so, so useful. My mentor was absolutely fantastic. I can't underestimate the value of having someone at the bar who's been through this hellish process, helping you along the way. The employability service at ULaw when you're on the BPC, for me, they were absolutely fantastic. I had weekly one-on-one appointments. They read through my applications. Even on offer day when I couldn't decide between chambers, I was able to ring them up in a stress. I was like, I don't know what to do. This chambers has a higher pupillage award, but I don't think I like them as much as the chambers with less. And they offer that advice last minute. You can just call them up and they'll be so helpful. Pupillage and How to Get It is an absolutely excellent website. The advice can appear a bit harsh and scary, but honestly, it's so good for every aspect of the pupillage process. Go on YouTube, there are so many resources on there that can help you along the way. In terms of chambers themselves, the best advice that I personally found to be, it was 3 Temple Gardens, 5 Essex Court, 36 Group, Matrix, 3 PB and Karam. They all have fantastic resources on their website. They essentially tell you how you can get a pupillage application into the interview room. They're so good. Also legal Twitter, fantastic, especially on days when you might get rejections, because all the barristers that have succeeded at the bar will talk about their rejections too. It's actually a really good place to be if you're feeling down about the process. And finally, the Pupillage podcast is absolutely fantastic too, and that's on Spotify. So that's everything from me today. I hope it's been useful to you all. Have a fantastic day at the fair. Thank you very much.